Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on the time zone you are in. Welcome to the panel discussion on modernizing through digitizing, regaining the competitive advantage. My name is Jeetesh Bhatia, and I head the transaction banking at Mizuho, India. And I'm delighted to be moderating this session with esteemed panelists providing views across corporate, banking, fintech, and Swift with over 100 plus years of combined experience. I would like to welcome our 5 panelists. The first panelist for the session is Mr. Karl Wegner, CEO, Contour. Second panelist is Mr. Vinit Mishra, Head of Treasury, India, Louis Dreyfus. Our third panelist is Mr. Akash Munjal, Senior Vice President, Product Management, HSBC. Fourth panelist is Mr. Ajit Nair, Senior Board Advisor, TradeAssets. And our fifth panelist is Ms. Nandini George, Director, Strategic Partnerships, India and South Asia, SWIFT. As many of you are aware, India has seen an impressive progression in the ease of doing business ranking over the past few years. It's been tremendous achievement over the last several years, considering the size and the complexity of India. As per the World Bank's report of ease of doing business, India's rank has improved from 142nd in 2014 to now 63rd in 2020. India has earned a place amongst the world's top 10 improvers for third consecutive year. There have been several improvements which have happened across customs, digitization in trade, etc., and the list can just go on and on. In light of this, I would like to divide this topic into 3 parts. First, how has the trade digitization journey been so far? Second, what have been the obstacles which have been faced? And third, how should future journey be to regain our competitive advantage? We will probably start with the first part as to how the trade digitization journey has been so far. To make this session interactive, we would have a few poll questions, and I'll request your active participation in the same. As we start, the first poll question will flash on your screen now. I will request you to please cast in the vote on the first poll question, which reads, in your organization, what has been the percentage increase in digitization of trade processes in post-COVID versus pre-COVID? And your options are there on the screen. No change, 0 to 25%, 25 to 50%, 50 to 75%, and more than 75 to 100%. I'll request all to please cast in your votes. While you're casting votes, I will open up this question and seek the views from our panelists. First, I'll probably request Vinit to share a corporate perspective on the same.
Thanks, Jeetesh, and good afternoon, everyone. Greetings for the day. So like every other organization, when COVID started, of course, I mean, we all were nervous that, sooner or later government is going to put restrictions and how the business is going to go on. But thankfully, I mean, given that we are a multinational organization and we were present in countries where COVID already did the damage, and people using their experiences were, quite open sharing. Also, organization as LDC, I mean, they were proactively, tracking all the nuances on the operational impact side and what could be the BCP plan, which is more suitable to the business. Again, I mean, commodity business, as you know, which LDC is in, We do most of physical commodity trading, and movement and logistic movement was one of the key area which was very severely impacted. Apart from that, we noticed that initial phase of lockdown in India as well, we noticed that even moving trade document from one place to another was very tiring effort. Even though government was very supportive to organization which was part of food industry and so on, that they should call the workforce back at least to the certain percentage, follow all the restrictions, and they were providing support. uh, we noticed that still there was a long way to go, and that way, to be honest, I mean, I'm very thankful to the bankers which basically bank with us, and their understanding that when we went back to them proactively asking for simply working on email indemnity or maybe COVID specific indemnity, just to facilitate. These are very small enablers, but this went a long way, basically making companies prepared for the worst which was to come. And I remember precisely in exactly around same time last year, I was having discussions with bank, and some banks even questioned that, Vinit, are you really feeling that something like this can happen, and will we going to use these kind of documentation? And when the lockdown was announced and we were told to stay back home all of a sudden overnight, I mean, those things actually helped us go a long way. Also, I mean, as an organization, I think most of the corporates would agree that, and I'm yet to see the poll result. I'd be surprised if I receive the contrary view, that most of us were working on digitization as an initiative. So this used to be a fancy word for most of the organization which we were using, and we were trying to pilot, trying to do certain things just to adopt this digitization wave which has been created maybe in last couple of years. uh, as a LDC, I can proudly say that we went live on processing payment using Swift to our vendors. And by the way, I mean, in a day we process something like 300 to 400 payments, uh, almost on every day on an average, right? And we are using Swift connectivity along with a treasury system called Trax, which is part of uh, earlier it was SunGuard, now it's FIS. Many of you from treasury background could understand. So this Swift is basically enabling us to continue or do payment wherever in world we are sitting in, because all the systems are integrated. Nothing was impacted. At least suppliers' payment was not impacted. The main challenges and hurdles we faced, and because I see the panelists are from trade and transaction banking background, that when you had LCs or maybe uh, trade transaction to deal with, only few bank at that point of time were live. And I can proudly say that LDC was then live for trade platform with couple of banks. So one was Stanchart, which was using straight to bank, where they integrated EDPMS and extended us the platform where we can lodge our export bill and import bill online, which again maintain the continuity. And the another one was JP Morgan Chase, which has virtual branch, what they call as a platform. These two were the main facilitator. But I mean, apart from let's say a few LC transaction, thankfully with the support of bankers and certain regulatory change which has recently taken place, we haven't faced any disturbance, so to say, on the business side. Of course, the another impact, and I'm happy to acknowledge this, that internally as an organization, even though we have had success earlier before COVID, now we are working even more aggressively on digitizing, let's say, trade and transaction internally, not just on treasury and trade finance side, but also on the operational front.
Thanks, Vinny. That's interesting. And your guess was right. The poll responses are out, and clearly the no change category is absolutely 0%. So every organization has seen a shift, maybe accelerated by COVID on the digitization. So 0 to 20, 25 to 50% bracket has seen the maximum response, almost 40%, and 30% feel between 0 to 25%. So absolutely, maybe from Vinit's view, I'll probably now request Akash from a banker's view perspective. How have you really seen the journey?
Sure. Thanks, Jeetesh. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning to everyone. So, Jeetesh, I'll absolutely agree with what Vinit has spoken about, right? COVID has been a catalyst for digitization. But if I have to take a macro view here, okay, digitization has been happening pre-COVID level also. So, if you look at Industry 4.0 or the digital revolution in the industrial sector, uh, all these sectors, all the economies, all the countries are today looking at it as both as an opportunities if they're able to scale up and as a challenge. And India is obviously not an exception to that. The reason I say that is because digitization doesn't only affect trade finance, which to my mind is a derived product of trade, but affects the trade per se. Yeah, and you look at it, it affects all the stages of trade, whether it's your pre-production stage, whether it's your customer analytics to forecast demand, whether use of robotics for efficiency. So digitization, I think, has been acknowledged as one of the main ingredients for any country, any sector, any industry to gain its competitiveness. The way we see it is there are three fundamental changes happening in trade. Okay, these are what is being traded, how is it being traded, and where is it being traded, or where the trade is happening. Now, if you look at the statistics of international trade, the growth has largely been muted. But if you look at the share of the services vis-a-vis the merchandise trade, it's always on the uprise for last few years, right? So data and service flow has been a key component of international trade. If you look at these, some of the reports which have come in, the data flow in cross-border trade is expected to reach nine times the level that was in 2014 in 2021. The other thing that we are seeing is the emergence of or the enhancement of service exports by the developing country as they continue to upskill their population. Okay? That's the first piece. Second piece is where the trade is happening today. Now, if you look at the early 19s or probably even the early 2000s, the cost of labor was a great component in deciding how the trade would happen, right? Which no longer is the case now. Now it's about having skilled labor, proximity to natural resources, which is what is now driving the trade. Globalization, yes, there are few blips. There is talk of Brexit. There is India, China, US tension, trade tensions. But will the globalization cease to exist? Our view is it will never. Yes, there is a sectoral, there is a fundamental shift in the trade. So from east to west, it's now inter-regional trade, which has become much more important. So the trade is happening within the regions. And one of the major reason is the growing population, the growing population migrating into middle class or migrating from rural to urban areas. The third aspect as to how the trade is happening, I think this is a place which I personally am quite excited about, which is the entire the e-commerce space, the digital space, right? If you look at the e-commerce space, I mean, not only in India but across the globe, it's growing at a tremendous speed. In next 2 years in India, it's expected to reach a $1 trillion of international trade. The reason it opens up geographies for even the small and medium enterprises to trade across the globe. So it provides a great platform. Now, if I have to go specific into home or go closer to home in India, I think India has done a remarkable job as a country. Okay? The Digital India initiative by the government, I think, is the right step in this direction. Whether you look at the aspects such as digital locker, the eKYC, or the Aadhaar on the personal space, or you look at the steps which the government has taken in terms of the cross-border trade, which is by digitizing your bill of entries, the shipping bill, introduction of IDPMS, EDPMS, or removing paper from customs, or allowing which a help promote the efficiency and transparency in trade. So I remember when we used to talk about DLT or blockchain a few years back, it was seen as a distant concept, and we will talk about Bitcoin and probably use of digitization or DLT in trade finance, something which is going to happen in 3 to 5 years. Now we have done various transactions. All the bank or most of the majority of the banks have done transaction. Contour is commercializing the entire blockchain concept, which helps enhance efficiency, right? So these aspects will definitely help enhance efficiency. Now, other aspect which I'm pretty excited about is the entire GST, the concept of threads, the OCEN, which is prompting banks to lend to a larger population on the basis of, let's say, a transaction history versus the traditional form of lending, right? So these are the impacts that you see on the digitization. The guarantees going online, or the Swift working on getting the guarantees completely digitized is a great step. The e-stamping is a great step, right? And all these also have an impact on the compliance aspect. Let's not forget that, because that's a critical component for India as an economy, India as a country to be taken favorably or to continue its position as a favorable destination for cross-border trade. But are we there? Are we at the epitome, or are we at the zenith of the trade digitization? Probably no. There are few building blocks. The evolution has happened, but in my view, I think we have taken baby steps, and there is still a long way to go to digitize trade as compared to probably a payments or any other industry, right? So it's paper is still not completely gone away from it. It's still considered a golden source of growth. So I'll take a pause there.
Sure, thanks, Akash, and that's a very interesting perspective. Maybe now I'll request Ajit for his views and as to what he's really seeing from a trade assets perspective.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks to Vinit and Akash for starting the conversation on what we are doing now and the state of affairs that we are in India. I think what has happened is that a lot of digitization started a couple of years back. It's not something which started now. And in India, I think it gained momentum with the Digital India program, which started by the recent government. Now, what COVID has done is it has accelerated the whole process of democratizing the whole world in terms of getting people to do more transactions on the digital platforms that are increasingly available, and that's being seen by what you see as more and more fintechs coming in, and what is also happening is that a lot of disintermediation is taking place in the banking world and the BFI space, where we see that costs are getting reduced, people are optimizing on the costs, clients are having to, kind of reduce their costs because in a period of sluggish growth, what was happening was that the economy, as we see probably in India and various parts of the globe, was not growing at a pace that we would love it to be. And so the customers and the clients and the corporates were really kind of trying to drive down the costs. And that is where digitization has taken a foreplay, and I mean, it's kind of come into the forefront. And we see a lot of activity which is happening in that front, both from the private sector and the government. The government has taken a lot of initiative in terms of setting up the backbone, really, and might be, as the other panelists have mentioned, it's not to the extent that we would love it to be, but really speaking, if you look at it, it's necessary in any particular country that the government takes a big initiative, because these are all big public initiatives. Like, for instance, we mentioned about the the NPCI, where you have a unified payment interface, which is really a big driver for many other applications which are coming in. But having said that, I think there is much more to be done. There is another area where in the trade fund, in the local business market, you have GST, where the country has kind of created a platform called GST IN, where every transaction is and eventually, I mean, it is being certain cut off over a certain period, certain amount of transactions are being logged into that. They have to be mandatorily done in that platform. But over a period of time, we would be able to track every transaction which is happening in this country, and even cross-border through a network like this, which is a big initiative that the government has taken. I mean, my panelists mentioned about digi-lockers and things like open forge, where probably we need more of open source, which is required to be done. Threads is another area where the pricing of transactions, financing of transactions, that is being dropped down. So what we have been trying to do in trade assets, for instance, is, like I mentioned earlier, it's democratizing the whole process where it need not be size anymore. Anybody can be involved, and that's what really matters. I mean, anyone, anywhere in the world can be connected to this digital medium, and interact with one another. So trade assets essentially is a kind of a price discovery and communication platform among banks globally. We've got about 60 odd banks already signed up in 15 different countries. So that's going to even kind of make it even more closer, the world a much more closer place for transacting, especially when it comes to cross-border trade assets. That's what I guess present state of affairs. Some banks are there. Some banks have taken an initiative and utilized this particular opportunity. I mean, I would call it an opportunity, even though it's, in some sense, in the beginning, people thought it's really a pandemic, and we needed to kind of, safeguard ourselves against it. And some foreign banks, some Indian banks, they have taken, advantage of the blockchain technology which is available. So digitization is fast going up, and I think it's got a lot more to go. But I guess it's a good beginning, and we would see more of it. India has had an advantage of being, learning from the experiences of other countries. You will see some of the more, developed countries still catching up with what we have probably done, and then we have the advantage of talent and resources. Many of these outsourcing and insourcing activities taking place in India, although we had China as trying to catch up with us. So I guess that's in brief what I would say is the state of affairs that we have in India, and digitization definitely is a way to go. Many more things happening and to be applied in the real world, like artificial intelligence and machine learning. Things like that is going to help us catch up, and maybe we move into a more leisurely world and let the machines work for us. So I think that's what stop it for the time.
Thanks, Ajit. That's an interesting perspective. So maybe we can now shift gears to understand what have been the obstacles which have been faced on the trade digitization. So maybe I'll request for the second poll question, which will flash on your screen. I'll request all to please vote. There is a button on the right-hand side of your screen. Request you to please vote. And while you are voting, maybe I'll see the view from the panelists. So Nandini, what's your view on the different obstacles which have been faced on the trade digitization?
So good afternoon to everybody. Just a quick introduction. I lead the partnerships for SWIFT in India and South Asia. It was good to hear so many of you talk about SWIFT supporting their organizations during COVID and the lockdown and the challenges that came with it. But I'm sure many of the audiences already are aware, SWIFT is a not-for-profit cooperative. It's owned by the banks. And for 4 decades now, our singular agenda has been to focus on what the members in our platform need, primarily to standardize and to constantly innovate so that our members' agenda of truly being paperless is achieved. Now, in this context, several of my conversations with CFOs and executive directors for finance at oil PSUs, government entities, and even large corporates have always led me to kind of draw to some conclusions that the challenges that we face in India are very real and sometimes even very rudimentary. I remember an oil PSU leader once telling me, paper by virtue of being paper needs 2 hands to move it. I don't think anything could have been more real as a problem. And I also see that, one of the, if I had to kind of bundle it into 3 large challenges that we see across corporates, The first one is that the large beneficiaries, who are actually the ones receiving documents, trade finance documents specifically, are still insisting on paper. So that will have its impact in terms of smaller organizations being able to transform themselves. The second piece that I see is that with documents moving so fluidly, technology is really not the primary game changer here. It is the legal frameworks that we are in today that makes the difference, because technology is an enabler to whatever legal framework that challenge that I see very predominant is, customers asking, can banks in India really scale up as fast as they should to be able to service our problem statements that I see more, right from tracking and tracing payments to be able to, us to be aware. On SWIFT, when you're sending your trade documents, you have something called File Act, wherein you can attach documents and send your LCs, bank guarantees, and all of those documents going through the systems. So these are some very basic, real challenges that I have seen.
Thanks, Nandini. Maybe now I'll request Karl and for his views on the same, and I'll also want to just share the responses from poll. Clearly shows that what are the different challenges which acted as an obstacle, and external factors or ecosystem has been rated almost 60%, followed by bandwidth and connectivity, and we can see some of that, and also the trust factor. So, Karl, what are your views on these challenges or the obstacles for in growing trade digitization?
Yeah, no, thanks, and thanks for the opportunity to be here. I think first, again, a little bit introduction. I mean, Contour is a bank-owned network of banks, corporates, and partners that helps build on blockchain, that helps trade finance be more efficient, transparent, and secure. And we manage letters of credit transactions in 17 countries in the world. I think the biggest challenges that we see, and I've been doing, if you talk about that 100 years of trade experience, I'm over 1/3 of that. So I think we have more than 100 years doing this for a long time. The big challenges are, as Nandini said, was regulations or the legal part, right? I think the second thing is standards. And the third thing is just adoption. And again, regulations. I think the governments are making progress because of COVID to adapt regulations, and India's made tremendous progress over the last sort of year and a half in being more open to looking at digitalization, and I think that's a fantastic progress. Standards, though, I want to define standards. Standards are not something that, if the whole world waits for standards to be set, then we'll never start, right? So standards are something that we need, but we need people to adopt and build things and then adapt to those standards that are being built. And the example I have in 2005, the APEC, paperless trading initiative was all APEC, the 14 countries were going to be paperless trading by 2007. Then they said 2009, and then it sort of went away, right? This is not the first time we've tried to do this. I think nowadays, one of the challenges that they had before was technology. And I think with distributed ledger technology, it allows countries to also keep their own data, which is something, and the data privacy, which is something that's very important to countries. So I think the technology has now caught up to some of the challenges, but still the legal framework, and standards are pieces that we still need to work on to move this farther. And again, it's not just one country, it's the world, right? Because when you ship, you move, it's not just, you can build a national trade platform in one country, but you need two countries for an import export. And so they need to be, connected. And I think being able to connect with ecosystems that are built to do this, as Contour, and working with standards that ICC and others are beginning to build, will allow that speed to keep on going faster.
Thanks, Karl, and that's an very great and gives a complete perspective. Maybe we now shift gears and with the journey and the obstacles, now let's try and discuss as to what can be done or the future path for the journey, and what are the changes should be done to help transform and regain that competitive advantage. So maybe I'll request for the third poll question, which will appear on your screen now. And I'll request Kane saying there's a voting button on the right-hand side of the screen. While you are voting for the same, let me just try and link this to some of the questions also which are being posed. And maybe I'll seek Akash's view from a banker's perspective. The question is, when can we expect the e-bill or e-bill of lading to become a new normal in trade?
I think that's an excellent question. Okay, and I was making a presentation sometime back to a group of people, and I showed them the bill of lading, which probably hasn't undergone any change in last so many years. Or to be fair, it's undergone a change because now you can computer print it rather than handwriting it. But yes, so I think the piece around e-bill of lading becoming a reality, I think, or a new norm, I think there is a significant work which is happening there, right? So like Karl mentioned, there is a regional push, there is a global push. Yes, there are countries which are doing it, there are shipping lines which are doing it, and it's moved a lot of places from where we were, let's say 3 years back, to what we are today. Okay, but are we on the is it something which has completely become the a new norm? The answer is no. Yes, there is work happening. I would say the baby steps have already been taken. Now it's a time to take the giant leap, right? So probably if I have to take an analogy from telecom, we have probably moved away from a landline to a cordless to a smartphone. But yes, are we on the pro or is it a norm that probably everybody has a smartphone? The answer is no. So we need to move that to a very, very fast pace. And there is a lot of work which is happening by all the stakeholders, whether it's shipping lines, banks, customs. Everybody is working towards that piece. So yeah, so I think we would want to see it sooner than the later.
Thanks, Akash. And in fact, before I request Vinit for his views from a corporate perspective on this, the poll results are out. And on the question which was asked as to what are the changes to be made to enable further growth of trade digitization in the country, 64% have voted that connecting all trade stakeholders on a common platform, i.e. chambers of commerce, insurance, everyone. So Vinit, what's your view from a corporate perspective on this?
I can truly connect with the voters because, like I started in the beginning, I mean, we really felt the need, and that's actually the requirement at this point of time to realize that to any solution to work at its full potential, unless you have all ecosystem partners working together, adopting it fully, it's not going to give you the result you envisage in the beginning, right? So today what's happening, let's say if I need to draw a banking perspective here, let's say if I see a multinational bank or even private banks, they are vocal about digitization initiatives, but when you come and compare with the PSU bank, again, I mean, not that I want to offend them, but when I compare, I mean, the gap is very huge. And you should realize that India is a country where still, you like it or not, majority of corporates as well as the volume is still managed by PSU bank. What they do becomes trend. What they adopt is becoming the practice, right? So of course, I mean, convincing regulators and definitely, I mean, like rightly Akash highlighted, we have seen regulators making changes. They are basically often coming and encouraging corporates and participants basically for adoption. What we have seen on the payment side, is basically a very great example to showcase that same can be done on the trade digitization piece as well. We need to understand one thing, that majority of trade regulations, rules, etc. has been made in era where physical trade was taking place. Goods were basically supposed to cross a border. Today that has changed. I mean, in order to let's say a service export to take place, it's not the case. I mean, sitting here, I can export, let's say, $1 million of services to overseas countries, and so it can come to India as well. And accordingly, those rules need to change. Also, the aspirations in trade is changing. Now we are talking about 24/7 trading, just in time delivery, those kind of practices. So one, that of course, I mean, we need to connect with ecosystem, I mean, all the ecosystem participant. Secondly, we need to consider the fact the trade is modernizing and cater the requirement, expecting those practical aspects here. Yeah.
Thanks, Vinit. And maybe now I ask Nandini from her views to help connect the different stakeholders from a SWIFT perspective.
So this is a very this is a topic I feel very passionately about, and I drive this conversation with so many people now that what I'm seeing as change and what should be change, and there is a point at which they are all meeting now, and that really encourages me, because while SWIFT is interbank financial telecommunication platform, we're also the custodian of the bank relationships as well, to kind of get this whole piece flowing seamlessly for corporates and for banks. And one of the things that really is extremely encouraging is to see that today over SWIFT, several banks are able to so a corporate is able to send documents today, an LC or a bank guarantee issuance, directly over SWIFT with supporting documents, e-stamped, automated, just like Akash had mentioned. So it's entirely automated, e-stamped. So the time, if you imagine the kind of change this brings about, there was a time when if a customs or a large beneficiary was getting a document, it took around 21 days for that to happen. And with this kind of digitization, which is through a valid platform, through the banking network, e-stamped on that system, it takes away that time, the manual intervention, the errors that causes, all of that, to reduce it to maybe a few days and eventually over a few hours once several of the banks are completely on this platform. So first and foremost, what I would like to see, and what we are driving as SWIFT as well, is to see the largest beneficiaries have mandate within themselves to accept digitally, so that they can store digitally, so that they can, there's a finance director who once told me, for us to be able to invoke a document, we have to first find it. So to be able to do, or to speed up business outcomes in our country, the first step is to be able to store digitally, to be able to pass on digitally, and to have this valid platform. So first one, government bodies accepting and adopting digital transmission of documents. That's my first one. In that direction of change, we've seen the recent news on the Singapore government accepting the digital BL, and also this then democratizes the entire trade finance documents. Karl did mention about the entire ICC digital initiatives, digital standards initiatives. And I think somewhere till such time that, worldwide we have systems and processes in place to meet the needs of what we foresee, there are rule books that are being set. So I think it calls for a bit of a zoom out and a relook at what we're doing, how we can do it differently, and maybe speed up processes. And more than anything else, 4 billion documents today, papers today, flow through our systems worldwide. COVID has been an eye-opener, and I can't imagine a bigger reason for change. And I think there is no time like now, and I think we are poised at a very interesting time of change. And I think as our government, we have seen this possible as well, right? We have seen STPI being able to actually implement change and drive that growth for the IT sector that we have today. So I'm very optimistic, and I'm very motivated to keep driving the piece that we do here in India with the banks, with the government entities, and also with the regulatory bodies.
Sure. Thanks, Nandini. And maybe I'll now seek Ajit's views on this as to what really, because to help connect the same.
See, my view, I mean, in the sense that a lot, like I was mentioning, a lot needs to be done from the regulatory front, in the sense that the government is doing a lot of work in terms of creating an environment so that more and more digitization takes place. And there is a lot of need for collaborating between the government, the private public partnership, because, like I mentioned, the private sector would obviously be spending money for its own, looking at certain customer needs. But from a broad-based point of view, it's a government which needs to put in the big money and create an infrastructure. So there has to be a conducive environment which they continue to foster, so that the regulatory environment makes digital be adopted, and and along with that, another thing which course is needed is to ensure that affordability is there. I mean, and probably when the scaling up takes place, there would be more affordability, more of the the MSME sector, which is a large segment of our country in India, would also be connected to this digital world. That is so the partnership is required, investment by corporates into both the resources and the talent, because we're talking about new technology where a lot of it is getting drawn out of the country. Probably we're drawing resources from outside, which needs to be probably pulled in and focused on to developing the the next level here. And that's another thing which is required. And in the trade world, what really happens as we see it now, we have a physical world and a financial world. The document flowing in one side and the goods moving in the other side. So this connect, which the other panels talked about, is very important in terms of all the stakeholders getting connected into a similar platform, a compatible kind of platform where we probably use embedded systems or have more APIs which will connect the different ones, while there are some other people developing a consistent single platform. That is another thing, because otherwise authentication, verified kind of verification processes which are required in the documentary world is getting going along one line, whereas the goods are flowing in another line, and there are several instances of fraud which is happening in the world of trade, which is of late, which we have noticed too. And so there is this, the authentication requirement, which is to be, which several of the people who are participants or stakeholders are developing or working on. And this has to be sustainable, because ultimately, one of the things which we see and one of the opportunities which we see for TradeAssets is that there is a huge trade finance gap, which is, I mean, there is a lot of trade which is not being done because there's somebody is not there to finance it. And that's a lost opportunity. Might not be in India, might be in Africa, might be in some other lesser developed country. So that is another thing which I think needs to be, and by connecting to these digital world, we will be able to meet that financing needs. There will be more people coming in to finance the thing. The pricing could go down. So these are there are a lot of wants in this, and I think that's where I think we need to kind of focus on. Both the private and the public sector needs to kind of and of course I think things like SaaS and PaaS are coming into play. Whether it's software as a service or a platform as a service, these are developments which are taking place, and more focus on that in the trade world would trade finance world will also help in making it more easier and convenient and efficient for all the players. I mean, especially the participant, the main participant, the buyer and the seller, who starts the whole transaction, and then we all come in, whether it's the customs, the government, or the inspection agencies or the insurance companies. Everybody comes in post the original transaction. So it's making it easy for the primary participants, and that's where I think the focus should be, and connecting the dots around those two people, I mean, those two segments. I think that's what it is, and being able to sustain it in the long run. I think that's what is needed. I think the tall call, but it's a constant process. We have to keep going on it, and I'm sure we will kind of evolve, and that's it.
No, thanks. And I'm sure this is one topic where probably 45 minutes itself may not be sufficient, but I'm conscious on time. So maybe as a conclusion, we can say that clearly the panelists have seen a significant progress which has happened, though there are a few obstacles, and but clearly the future looks bright. There is clearly a path which is there, and the past performance where India has shown tremendous improvement in the ranking clearly shows that there is extremely positive and optimistic mood, and we are on the path to retain and regain the competitive advantage and probably deliver the trade growth. I would really want to thank all our panelists for their extremely valuable insights, and to all our attendees for being extremely interactive. In spite of it being a virtual session, we really appreciate. And I hope you had a great time, and you leveraged on the different experiences from the panelists. On behalf of all of us, we would wish you a great day and exciting sessions going forward. Thank you.